Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Bishop Barron was once again invited to give a speech to politicians. He did so in a rather bland British conference room with poor lighting. It was quite the mundane scene. However, this speech was incredibly vibrant to contrast, and some of the concepts you find in it are not only good for those politicians, but they're extremely useful for my life and your life as well. So he's going to talk about mercy and how mercy gives rise to love. And he actually says that this is kind of a hermeneutical principle. It's a way that you can interpret Scripture. And when you see Scripture in this ebb and flow between love and mercy, you're seeing the whole picture. But his point is that mercy gives rise to love and vice versa. Love gives rise to mercy ad infinitum. It's a beautiful, virtuous circle that changes the world and its inhabitants. So that's what he wants to talk to these politicians about, specifically focusing in on mercy. So I cut the fluff in the beginning. He introduced himself and defined mercy. He defines mercy as contrasting to karma. Karma is kind of that universal principle of justice that you get what you deserve. And the Christian principle of mercy is that we do not get what we deserve. This clip picks up where Bishop Barron is in full story mode. Check this out.
So let me try to show it to you in just a few scriptural stories. The first one is Simon the Pharisee and the prostitute who appears in the house of Simon the Pharisee. Remember? The story commences, Jesus takes his place at the table in the house of Simon. And, we tend to think automatically, Pharisees are bad guys because of the long tradition of the critique of the Pharisees. But we're going to miss the point of the story if we do that. The point is, Pharisees were good guys. They were seen as righteous. They were trying to live, the Jewish life in an entirely righteous way. So there's Simon, and we find coming into the house is a sinner. And the way that term is used in the story is clearly indicating a prostitute. With an alabaster jar of ointment, she crouches at the feet of Jesus, anoints his feet, bathes his feet with her tears, showing extravagant signs of respect and affection. Now, what's the reaction of Simon? Well, it's right out of the book of karma, right? He's thinking in terms of strict justice. Listen, if this man were a prophet, he would have known who and what kind of woman this is who's touching him, that she's a sinner. In other words, she doesn't deserve grace. She deserves punishment. And he's judging Jesus as well. Right? If he were the prophet he claims to be, he would know this. He would know this is a great violation of the law of justice. Now, watch Jesus' technique here. And keep in mind the sort of theatrical blocking of this scene, how the figures are arranged. Jesus, the woman behind him at his feet, right, anointing his feet. Jesus turns to Simon. Simon, I've got something to say to you. A man forgives two people who are indebted to him, the first for 500, the second for 50. Who would love him more? And Simon correctly answers, well, the first one, the one who is forgiven more. Jesus praises this, and then this is the interesting reversal. Then turning toward the woman here at his feet, he said to Simon, compelling Simon to see the woman through him, as it were, and not simply through the lens of the law, not simply through the lens of karma or justice. He says beautifully, Simon, do you see this woman? See, do you see her now with fresh eyes, seeing her through the lens of Jesus' own mercy? And then he says this, I entered your house, you gave me no water for my feet, but she's bathed my feet with her tears. You gave me no kiss, but she's not stopped kissing my feet. You did not anoint my head with oil, but she's anointed my feet with ointment. Conclusion, Simon, you've been forgiven little. She's been forgiven much. How do we know this? Because you've shown so little love. And she's shown extravagant love. That's the spiritual physics. Mercy comes first, and then gives rise to love. And the more extravagantly the mercy is received, the more extravagantly love is expressed. Now, is it because God is being difficult with Simon? No, it's that Simon has not opened his heart to the divine mercy. And the sign of that is he doesn't love. He doesn't love. The sign that she has been open to mercy is the extravagance of her love. And then Jesus concludes, I tell you, Simon, her sins, which are many, have been forgiven. Hence, she has shown great love. You know, and I think dear Pope Francis at times is critiqued by folks for being soft on sin because he emphasizes mercy. No, no, no. Is Jesus soft on sin in this story? On the contrary, he's acknowledging she's committed many sins. She's a great sinner. But the point is, she's been so mercifully treated by the Lord. She's been so open to that forgiveness that now she gives rise to great love. Here's the second story that illustrates the same principle. In fact, I would really argue almost every encounter with Jesus displays this rhythm I've been talking about. This is the story in the 8th chapter of John of the woman caught in adultery. It's very interesting. This story commences in the temple precincts. Now, you go to the temple. At the heart of the temple was the Holy of Holies. Not in Jesus' time, it was gone by then, but classically at the heart of the Holy of Holies was the Ark of the Covenant, the top of which was referred to as the mercy seat. It's the place where the Lord was envisioned as positioning himself to express his mercy. Why did you come to the temple? Whether you were praying or sacrificing or being taught or whatever it was, you came to the temple to receive the divine mercy. The reason it's important here is the story sets up a contrast between the mercilessness of certain people and the mercy shown by Jesus. He becomes in person the new mercy seat. I think that's why the temple is being emphasized here. So we know the story. The scribes and Pharisees bring a woman, and it's pointed out carefully, caught in the very act of adultery. I think we're meant to see, who are these people who caught the woman in the very act of adultery, and where were they positioned and standing, and how much time were they spending trying to... It's an extraordinary claim to make, not just, oh, we heard she's committed adultery. No, we've caught her in the very act of adultery, which means there's a kind of weirdly voyeuristic quality to their moralizing. Now, here a person that comes to my mind, because he loved this story, was the great Catholic philosopher René Girard. I don't know if you know his work. He was a Frenchman, but spent much of his academic life in America. And Girard began as a literary critic. He was a reader of Stendhal and Dostoevsky and Shakespeare. What did he find in Western literature over and over and over again? What he called the scapegoating mechanism. What he identified was when tensions arise in any community, and that could be a coffee klatch, it could be a table conversation, it could be a nation state, or anything in between. When tension arises in a community, by a largely unconscious instinct, we find a scapegoat. We find someone or some group to blame. And what happens is, in that instinct, we form a sort of ersatz or unhealthy community. And we all know this. If you're at a group and maybe someone leaves that everyone's a little bit suspicious of, and before you know it, what are we doing? We're all talking about that person, right? That old story about what's the one thing two academics can agree on? How poor the work of a third academic is, right? And it's true at the smallest level and then at the highest possible level. And we've seen that over and over again, nation states that find scapegoat groups to blame. Because it does something positive. It does bring people together, but in an ultimately unhealthy way. Well, what do we see here? And this is why Girard loved this story. This is classical scapegoating mechanism. Bringing people together in their common blaming of this woman, who, by the way, is dragged out in front of everyone. So everyone can see her, everyone can surround her. They can all come together in the common blaming of this woman. The fact they bring him to Jesus is very interesting. Girard thought that what scapegoaters often do is seek religious sanction for what they're doing. And we can see that in the cultures up and down the centuries. Um, Official religion doesn't get in the way of scapegoating, it tends to sanction it. So they bring this woman to this religious leader and say, now, in the law of Moses, it's very clear women like this should be stoned. What do you think, Rabbi? And of course, they think they have him, because if he says, oh, no, no, show mercy to her, well, that's against the law of Moses. If he says, no, follow the law of Moses, he seems to be at odds with his own teaching. So they think they have him. What does Jesus do as this very dangerous scapegoating mob is forming? By the way, another story that Girard really loved is Peter in the courtyard of the high priest. Remember, in the Passion narrative? Because a scapegoating mob is forming in that story, and Peter knows it. Oh, you're one of them. I saw you with that. No, not me. Come on, your accent gives you away. And that, by the way, is a classic scapegoating move. Find someone a little bit different, looks different, sounds different. Peter knows. That's why he denies the Lord so vociferously, because he's in very serious trouble in that scene. So, same thing here. This woman is in very serious danger. So what does Jesus do? It's the only time he's described in the Gospels as writing anything. He bends down and begins to write on the ground, and everyone's speculating, what's he writing there? We don't know. We're not told. I think what's happening is he's stopping the momentum of the mob. And I think this is a lesson for everybody in this room, because we're all susceptible to this dynamic. What do we do when you're in a small conversation, but the scapegoating mentality is happening? Everyone's coming together to blame somebody. Most of us join in, right? Because we enjoy that. We want to be part of the group. Jesus very deliberately interrupts the momentum of the scapegoating mob by bending down and writing on the ground. And then famously, let anyone among you who's without sin be the first to throw a stone at her. He reverses the scapegoating mechanism, turning the energy back on themselves. And then it says, beginning with the elders, the group dissipates. I think, fellow Christians here in this room, this is an exceptionally important lesson. In our world that is characterized by this dynamic, our job is to interrupt it. See, and more often than not, we're all sinners in this room, and so we tend to participate in scapegoating mechanisms, when the whole point is we're here to interrupt them. We're here to get in the way of this mob formation. Watch how Jesus does it there, and the mob dissipates. He's left alone with the woman, and this is St. Augustine's magnificent commentary. What's left is miseria et misericordia. This miserable, unhappy woman and mercy. Miseria et misericordia. Neither do I condemn you, Jesus says. Go your way, and from now on, do not sin again. There's the dynamic. What does she receive? Mercy within mercy within mercy. Does she deserve it? No. She's properly described as a sinner, indeed caught in the very act of sin. She doesn't deserve it. Karma would say what the scribes and Pharisees determine. But Jesus says, neither do I condemn you. But now, mind you, go your way, and from now on, do not sin again. Soft on sin? No. What's he saying? Now allow the mercy you've received to give rise to love in you. Mercy giving rise to love, which is then received by another as mercy, which gives rise to love. Now we're back in the right rhythm. See how he interrupts the false consciousness and then brings her back on the right path.
All right, so there we see Bishop Barron complete that beautiful picture of that virtuous circle of mercy giving rise to love. As we ponder his words, we have to ask ourselves the question, have we been freed up to love? And as I was thinking about this, the way we know we've been freed up to love, connected to what Bishop Barron is saying here, is we have received mercy. You see, we don't use our good actions, our merit, juxtaposed to mercy, to go and then scapegoat other people. I am a saintly person and this person has done wrong, and therefore I am going to bring about justice on this person instead of providing them with the mercy that we have all received. That's what I want to come back to, being freed up to love, being freed up to love by reminiscing and living into the mercy that we have received from God. I found it quite fascinating, the political, practical application that Bishop Barron provides these politicians. Stop scapegoating. Stop using your political, powerful positions to malign and defame other people, or to politically position yourself in other spots of authority or position, or to get what you want out of a situation. We are called as Christians, and it seems to me that he is talking to politicians here in this room that are in fact Christians and inspiring them, that we have to live into a different dynamic. We can't live into the vicious, sinful cycle of false justice leading to scapegoating, leading to character malignment, leading to disintegration, as Bishop Barron talks about. We can't live into that rhythm. What we have to live into is the rhythm that we have received from God. Mercy that gives rise to love. Now, this isn't the full clip. If you want to see the full speech of Bishop Barron, the link to his channel and the full speech is in the description below. I do think it would be imperative for us to see how he does conclude the speech, just to kind of resolve everything, and that's what we will do.
So I've shown here in, 4 biblical stories. I'm going to wager, if you crack open the New Testament again, you'll find this law everywhere. It's on every page of the Bible, really Old Testament and New, because it's what the Lord wants us to know. This is it. This is the Holy Grail. This is the meaning of life. If we're spiritually off kilter, it's because we're getting this thing backward somehow. So, first step, accept the fact that you've been accepted, even though you're unacceptable. Grace, grace. What's Bernanos? Tout est grâce. Everything is grace. Grace comes first. But then, let it happen. It will give rise to love in you. But then, see, maybe this is the point that we often overlook. In that measure, I become the vehicle of the divine mercy to others. Think of someone to whom you've shown great love, willing the good of the other. That means I'm not playing a game of egotism. I'm not trying to get something out of you. I'm simply desiring what's good for you. When that happens, it is necessarily experienced as the divine mercy. And then that will give rise to love in that person, See, that's our job, I think, as Christians. That's our job, is to be this, what did Jesus say, leaven, this salt, this light. We're not meant to live the spiritual life privately. It's not like for my own edification. No, it's to be a vehicle of mercy and therefore of love to the world. So, I've given you the meaning of life. No, and I mean that. I've learned that from every spiritual teacher I've ever read. I've learned that from every page of the Bible. And it's our job, I think, as Christians to not just proclaim it, but to live it. God bless you all. Thanks for listening tonight.